And right. look at the Fauci emails. So the Fauci emails came out, and I'm thinking, oh wow, this is pretty incredible. Look at what's in some of these emails. Look at what some of the titles of the emails are. And again, how are the sleepwalking people going to react to this? Well, within a couple of hours, I saw how the sleepwalking people were reacting to it on Twitter and Facebook, having not interacted with the emails themselves, having not read any of them or done the investigation. They waited to be told what to say. And then they just started all repeating that. So it's like
CNN was like, look how polite Fauci was.
Yeah, look how polite Fauci was. Actually, he really kept it together, considering that he worked for the Trump administration, who is such liars. I mean, they just bend the truth. It's like these emails show you that Fauci, which we already knew, he was an admitted liar. He admitted lying already, and they didn't care. But now you see in these emails just the depth of his deception, and they don't care. And so what did they say? They just start repeating this nonsensical thing about how he's so upstanding and truthful. And that doesn't even make any sense. That's not even a response to, that's like saying, hey, would you like peanut butter sandwiches? And another person saying, duck soup, or like something that doesn't make any, like, that's not an answer right. to the question. Right. Did you read these emails? And they're like, Fauci's so great. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, you didn't even read.
It's a complete, yeah. If they treated Watergate like this, Nixon would still be president.
Yeah.
I mean,
like, it's just. And I saw people in the threads when you tried to comment, when you tried to say, like, here's the link. If anybody wants to read the emails for themselves, go to the original source material, right? Read it for yourself, make up your own mind. And they had already gotten their talking points, and they all start like zombies. There were some of them in my threads already without having, like, don't you have any self-respect for your own intelligence? That maybe you should read the email and you're smart enough to form an opinion. No, they just immediately start speaking. One guy tried to turn the whole thread into something about Trump. That's what I mean about they're so easily distracted. That's one of their biggest triggers, or if you think of them as a marionette on a string, that's a really easy string to pull, is the media drop something about Trump in there, and then they're all like, but Trump, and I don't get it. It's fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, it's the emails they're a PDF and they're searchable. So you don't even have to read all 3,000 pages. You can search for stuff if you want to look at the emails. It's pretty easy. And by the way, just in case we haven't talked about it, we should just quickly say what they are.
Yeah.
Or what a couple of things in them were. Remember Dr. Peter Daszak that we talked about? We had read that Nicholas Wade article. And he was the guy who funded that coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Well, there's an email exchange with Fauci where, like, they're particularly concerned that parts of the virus look like it might be man-made. This guy's particularly concerned about the idea that it could have leaked from a lab, because he's funding the lab, and he sends this nice little thank you to Fauci for quashing the theory that it could have been a lab leak.
Yeah.
While at the same time, other people on this emailed thread and other emails demonstrate that by no means was it agreed that it definitely wasn't a lab leak. But Fauci went out and said, like, definitely wasn't a lab leak. So this guy thanks Fauci for covering his ass. And if you watch the Fauci interaction with Rand Paul, he had this kind of smug, basically he was saying, I don't know what to tell you, we don't do gain of function research. We didn't fund gain of function research. And if we did, it was in North Carolina, blah, 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 blah. We didn't fund gain of function, not gain of function. It's not gain of function. He was like, you're an idiot, Senator. It's not gain of function. Well, Fauci forwards an email with an attachment. It's forward, important. The attachment is, it's titled Barak she's reference to the bat lady. Barak Shi et al. Nature Medicine SARS gain of function .pdf. the idea that this has nothing to do with gain of function research and Rand Paul's an idiot is contradicted by Fauci's own internal communications. And yet, and by the way, one thing I didn't like about the emails that I find fascinating is there's a lot redacted.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know why it's redacted.
So, well, here's something. So if you share these emails, I don't know if anyone, we want to talk about propaganda and, Facebook and all the big social companies. If you share these emails on Facebook, they are now putting, how they go in and tell you things are fake news or whatever. Well, they can't say it's fake news. They're not going so far as to lie. They're not going so far as to lie and say these emails aren't real. I mean, I'm kind of surprised
that's a hard one to do.
I'm kind of surprised they haven't done that, though. You talk about how brazen they are, but they can't do that. So instead, they have an independent fact checker box that pops up now. I just sent you, Beverly, 3 images. So now if you share a screenshot of the email, they put a big box in front of the email that says missing content, missing context. Look at this. This happened to my post.
Beverly, we want to put it up, or should I put it up? Because I'm looking at it now.
And it says the same information was checked in another post by independent fact checkers. And so they're basically telling you that even though this email's true, like, you don't know what to think about it yet. We want to tell you what to think about it. Missing context, meaning we want to tell you what you should think about this and why it probably doesn't mean what it sounds like, the conclusions you might come to. So there, you guys see that? They put this. So now if you go to my post, permanently on top of the Fauci email, permanently is this big box that says missing context.
I don't think that means what you think it means, Facebook.
Yeah.
Missing context. They've been using this word context totally incorrectly.
Yeah.
The context is it was February 2020 and we were being told to use, well, actually Fauci at this time was saying don't use masks, and then he switched to use masks. The context is what we've all lived through. It's been the coronavirus lockdown. That's the context. What it's missing is propaganda. It's missing spin. It should say missing spin. Our spin hasn't yet been applied to this email, so please, I'm sorry. It's the spin is missing.
We haven't yet fortified this content.
Yes.
Beverly, can you put up the next image? I just want to read. This is the email that they're now censoring, or they're by putting a big missing context button on the top of it. So it's an email from Anthony Fauci, February 5th, 2020, to Sylvia Burwell. Subject, RE, a couple of quick questions. And he goes, Sylvia, he's responding to her. He goes, Sylvia, masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading infection to people who are not infected, rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring infection. The typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out virus, which is small enough to pass through the material. It might, however, provide some slight benefit and keep out gross droplets if someone coughs or sneezes on you. I do not recommend that you wear a mask, particularly since you are going to a very low-risk location. Your instincts are correct. Money is best spent on medical countermeasures such as diagnostics and vaccines. Safe travels. Best regards, Tony. Okay, so I mean, we're all adults. We can read this and say, okay, he was saying that masks aren't they're just, he says masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading infection, rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring infection. He also says the typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out the virus, which is small enough to pass through the material anyway. Okay, so Facebook's like, wait, guys, wait. There's missing context here.
By the way, what is the context that they add? Do you know?
Because otherwise you might be tempted to draw some very logical conclusions here. We want you to have the missing context. Okay, so here's the missing context. If you click on it, it says from independent fact checkers. And then They have a link to USA Today. They had USA Today give us the context, and it says, fact check. Let me see. This is a link. I'll send you the link, Beverly, if you want to put this up. Okay. While I read it.
By the way, while you're looking for that, do you remember when we did some very basic math over a year ago and said, hey, the size of the pores in masks are 300 microns, and it looks like this virus is 100 microns, and 300 is bigger than 100.
Yeah.
And everyone said, science denier.
Yeah, and
trust the science. Okay.
Right. And you know what? If you say stuff like that, actual facts, you could get banned back then. Yeah. You would get banned for saying what Fauci says in his email. Okay, so here, fact check. Missing context in claim about emails, Fauci's position on masks. This is from USA Today. The claim. Now, those of you who've gotten used to how Snopes is used to push propaganda these days, you'll recognize this format. The claim, an email from Dr. Anthony Fauci proves that he knew masks were ineffective at mitigating the spread of COVID-19. More than a month before the World Health Organization labeled the COVID-19 outbreak a global pandemic, Dr. Anthony Fauci received an email asking whether the writer should wear a face mask while traveling. And then they quote it. They quote the email we just read to you. Quote, masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading infection to people who are not infected, rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring infection, Fauci wrote back in a February 5th message. Quote, the typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out the virus, which is small enough to pass through the material, end quote. The country's leading infectious disease expert went on to say that he would not recommend the writer wear a mask during travel to a very low-risk location. Fauci's response was among thousands of pages of emails released to media outlets under the Freedom of Information Act. BuzzFeed News and the Washington Post used the emails to paint a picture about the early days of the pandemic response, but some of the messages have also spread rapidly as misinformation on social media platforms. So it's okay for BuzzFeed News and the Washington Post. They're part of us. They're like the legacy media. This is what USA Today is basically telling us here. What's the subtext here? Well, BuzzFeed News and the Washington Post, part of the legacy media like us, they were using the emails to try and paint an accurate picture about the early days of the pandemic response. But you dumb plebes, you deplorables took these messages and thought that you could read them yourself without our interpretation. This is just like when CNN, what was it? The guy on CNN, Chris Cuomo said, it's illegal for you to read the WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
It's illegal for you dummies to read the WikiLeaks emails. We have to read them for you, which is a lie, by the way.
It's different for us.
It's not illegal for you to read them. So it says so.
If anything, it should be illegal for Cuomo to read them. But
let's make that illegal. Okay, so misinformation they spread. Some of these messages have also spread rapidly as misinformation. Wait. What does that even mean?
They haven't made an argument yet at all, by the way. I'm looking for the argument.
But what does that mean? They've spread rapidly as misinformation. So did the emails get altered? How did they become misinformation? Did they get altered? Were they fake? Did people add stuff to them? No. Okay. Fact check. False claim about Fauci email leak mischaracterizes FIOA requests and release. Okay, more. Okay, so anyway, sorry, it goes down. So they say, for example.
But by the way, that I don't want to gloss over that fact check.
Oh.
That fact check has nothing to do with the content of the email.
No.
But it is, they want to say something false. They want to say something's false. Some people mischaracterize it as an email link, but actually it was a freedom of information request. Is that relevant? No. Not really relevant, the email. But they want to put something in there to make it, they're trying to paint this picture that these people are just idiots, and anyone talking about this, it's not a leak. Well, no one says, we're not saying it's a leak. We're reviewing the email itself, not whether it was leaked or freedom of information obtained. But sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Okay, so here's where they supposedly debunk this. I don't know what there is a debunk. It's an email that we can all read and understand, but they want to give us additional context. So here they go. For example, Fauci's response about masks has been held up as evidence that he knew early on that masks were ineffective. One commenter on a June 2nd Instagram post wrote that Fauci, quote, sat back and watched as we put face diapers on our children, end quote. Well, he did.
That's true. Yep.
We did put face diapers on our children. I mean, we collectively, a lot of people did. Okay, different versions of the post have been shared thousands of times, but this line of thinking ignores the evolution of understanding about the effectiveness of masks and guidance about wearing them. The evolution of understanding, or do you mean the evolution of mandates and compliance and conformity to something that's not scientifically supported by evidence? That's what you mean. We decided to become anti-science and disregard the science and to push these mandates on people. And this ignores that. We all decided to go that way and pretend like that was right. That's what that means. Responding to questions about the February 5th email during a June 3rd appearance on CNN, Fauci said his understanding changed as more information became available about asymptomatic transmission of the virus and the effectiveness of masks outside the hospitals. Quote, if we realized all those things back then, of course, you're asking the question, would you have done something differently if you knew what you know now? Of course, people would have done that. It's so obvious, he said on CNN. Okay, so let me just interject here for a second. Remember that Fauci told us that when he first told us, the public, not to wear masks, and he said that publicly in interviews, he said, don't wear masks. He said what he just said to this friend privately, don't wear masks. There's no reason to wear masks. Right. It won't help. Okay, then later when he said, no, forget about it. I do now support the mask mandates, right? He told us then that he lied earlier when he said they didn't work, that he lied because even though he knew they worked, he didn't want there to be a run on them because he wanted to save them for first responders. And so it was a good reason to lie and pretend that he pretended that masks don't work so that there wouldn't be a run on masks. So he said basically, I mean, what he was doing then is telling us I'm a liar. I lied about my opinion on masks, but I'm telling you now that it's okay to wear them because now we know we have enough of them. And now I'm telling you should wear them. And I lied earlier for good reason to save them for the first responders. That's what he previously said. Now this is different. Now it's saying he didn't lie. He lied about lying. Now it's saying, oh no, his opinion changed and evolved. He really was against masks. He really was. He wasn't lying to save them for healthcare workers. He really was against them and didn't think they worked. And then his opinion changed, and then he started to think they worked. That's a different explanation than what you previously gave us, which is that you were a liar for good reason. Now it's like, no, I didn't lie. My opinion changed. What?
By the way, something that's really annoying to me here is in the original email, he gives a reason. He says, the virus is too small. It can pass through. The mask can prevent droplets, but the virus can pass through the mask.
Yeah.
If you say your thoughts have evolved on mask effectiveness, you have to give reasons. You can't just say, our thoughts have evolved and now we think they're beneficial. Oh, were you wrong about the size of the holes in masks? Were you wrong about the size of the virus? Were you wrong about how viruses pass through holes? Were you wrong about, are there more droplets and what were you wrong about? How has it evolved? You can't just say our thoughts have evolved because science and move on. You have to give reasons. And I don't think there's any reasons being given. It's just, well, now we decide that masks are effective. Okay. Why?
They don't take, they don't.
What changed?
Look at this. They continue. Now, here's what's funny. They go, hey, by the way, that random nobody Instagram user we mentioned who shared the post on June 2nd did not respond to a request for comment. Okay. So shady, right? Yeah. Okay. So then they go, evolving guidance, under a section called evolving guidance. They continue and they say, Fauci and public health agencies have updated their guidance on masks and other mitigation measures as scientists learned more about how COVID-19 works and spreads. And this is what you're talking about, Carter. They don't include anything about how COVID works and spreads. What did you learn? What made you change your mask guidance? What did you learn that was different?
Oh, it turns out the virus can quantum tunnel except for through masks or what? What changed?
What changed? No, we just learned more, Okay, so then here's what's funny. They include the original excuse for his change in position on masks. So now they've got two reasons in here which contradict one another. They put it in here. They don't say Fauci, but they say public officials. But Fauci was one of them who said this. Public officials initially discouraged masks over fears of shortages for healthcare providers. So they've got both. They say on the one hand, he always believed in the effectiveness of masks, but he lied to the public about using them so we could save them for healthcare workers. And once we knew we had enough, then he told us to wear them. There's that. Then there's the other one that's in here that's like, no, he really was against masks and didn't think they were effective, but then his understanding evolved as he got more information and then he thought they were effective. Okay, well, those are two different things. Yes. And we're not going to tell you what that information was. Those are two different things. You guys are full of shit. This is full of crap. Your debunk needs to be debunked. Like, okay. So then it says, it continues. Then U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Jerome Adams tweeted in all caps on February 29, 2020, that people should, quote, stop buying masks in all caps. He said in the since deleted tweet that masks were ineffective and widespread use could lead to shortages. Fauci said during a March 8th
By the
interview.
Way, I love that. They're ineffective and widespread use could lead to shortages. Well, who cares if they're ineffective? Who the hell cares if there's shortages?
Yeah.
Like, either they're effective or you give a crap about shortages. They're not effective or you give a crap about shortages. You can't, it's like, I'm worried that too many people are going to take this placebo and then we won't have enough placebo.
Yeah.
For what?
For what? Okay, so then Fauci said during a March 8th interview, this is what I was mentioning earlier, a March 8th interview on 60 Minutes, that quote, this is what he told the public, quote, there's no reason to be walking around with a mask, end quote. March 8th, 2020, he said that on 60 Minutes. But on April 3rd, so a short month later, 2020, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention began urging people to wear masks in public. That was nearly a month after the WHO labeled the COVID-19 outbreak as a pandemic. Fauci's position changed too. The same day, the CDC released its new guidelines, so a month after he went on 60 Minutes and said, there's no reason for you to be walking around with a mask. A month after that, Fauci said during an appearance on Fox and Friends that people should wear masks when they can't socially distance. Since then, Fauci has explained his recommendation on masks changed as more information became available about the way that COVID-19 spreads and the effectiveness of masks outside hospitals. That's funny, USA Today, because he also explained it by saying that he lied to us so he can preserve them for healthcare workers.
I really want to click on that link because I would like to see his explanation, but that's a safe.
Wait, let's finish this though. The WHO changed its mask recommendation in June 2020. In July 2020, the CDC said, quote, cloth face coverings are a critical tool in the fight against COVID-19 that could reduce the spread of the disease, particularly when used universally within communities, end quote. In March, the CDC released new guidelines for people vaccinated against COVID-19. Those included guidance that vaccinated people could resume activities without wearing a mask. Oh, I remember that. Our ruling, missing context. This is the USA Today, missing context. The claim that an email, by the way, everything, by the standards they're using here, everything is always missing context. Usually when somebody says missing context, what they mean is they're missing context. There's context missing that if you had it would change your opinion about what you're reading here. That's not the case with this missing context, but that's what they're pretending.
Missing context means like to understand the meaning, you need more information. But you don't need more information to understand the meaning of that email.
And here, I've got one more thing to add to this. I just want to read this part under missing context. Mm-hmm. They say, the claim that an email from Fauci proves he knew masks were ineffective at mitigating the spread of COVID-19 is, all caps, missing context. Based on our research. Research. Okay. Fauci sent the email on February 5th, 2020. More than a month before the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a worldwide pandemic. the understanding about the effectiveness of masks and guidance about wearing them evolved during the pandemic, as did Fauci's position. Yeah, we know his position evolved. We know it. And then so here's what's interesting. If you go by his first excuse, and they include that one in here too. It's funny, they include both excuses. His first excuse was that he lied to the public about masks so he could, but he always thought they were effective, but he lied about that so that on 60 Minutes, so that we would not take them away from healthcare workers. That was his first excuse. Well, then why would he lie to his friend in a private email? Like, you would think that if that were the case, he'd be like, look, listen, Linda, or whatever her name is, listen, I don't want the public to know this because I don't want to run on masks, but you're my good friend and they really do work, so you should really wear one. Like you know what I mean? Like, why would you lie to Linda? Like, you could lie. I lied to the public so there wouldn't be a run on them. But Linda's one person. She's your good friend. Like, if you really thought they worked, why would you? Linda's not going to buy all the masks, is she? You could tell your good friend Linda to get a mask, but she's like, Dr. Fauci, should I wear a mask? And he's like, no, Linda. And inside he's like, oh, it hurts that I'm lying to Linda. It hurts, but I don't want there to be a run on the masks. Oh, but she's my good friend. Masks work. I wish I could tell her they work. She shouldn't be traveling without them. Oh, but also there could be, I gotta lie to Linda. Like, what?
So stupid.
Isn't it? Wait, her name is Sylvia. Sylvia, I wish I could tell you the truth, Sylvia.
Poor Sylvia. Well, I still don't see anything in here explaining why his position evolved. Other than, and by the way, they say things like, oh, he sent the email before the World Health Organization declared COVID a pandemic. Okay, but that's irrelevant. That doesn't matter. What the World Health Organization said about COVID and when, as in terms of whether it's a pandemic, is completely unrelated to the context. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, we're talking about his position on masks. And I still don't see the reason. Whenever I look and see what their reasons are, it's just, they just say, we now know they're effective. Like, that's just a statement. I never hear anything that's like, oh, we have evidence. This is what the evidence is.
Yeah, they don't ever say what it is.
Yeah,
they don't ever say what it is.
The science has changed. Yes, okay.
This is a bunch of gobbledygook. And you know what the whole purpose of it is? It's like in 1984. It's so that a person that you've already effectively brainwashed, okay, when they are confronted with a bit of truth seeps through, and let's say one of their wrong-thinking friends shares this direct original source material of Fauci's email, it's so that brainwashed person has you're now protecting their fragile brainwashed state. You're putting up a big button that says missing context, so that the brainwashed person go, oh, good. Okay. I'm glad I didn't have to.
Oh, good. I don't have to believe this.
Right. I'm glad I didn't have to read that and consider what that might mean. You are protecting their brainwashed state. And if they click on this, most of them won't even click on this to read it. But if they do, they're going to read it, and you're just taking their brain in circles that don't make sense, so that they leave it, and they've got some things to say. And if those things contradict one another, who cares? If it was because he lied to save masks for healthcare workers, or if it was because his understanding evolved, what does it really matter? You've given them two different and opposite things to say now about why his position changed, and that's good enough. And now they get to protect their brainwashed state. That's what this is for.
Yeah.
Missing context button.
I guess the other thing that's fascinating to me about this, I can't stand this mask. I'm sorry, I'm stuck on this. I really can't stand that the mask view has evolved and they don't give any information. I just want to remind everyone, cloth, which is what he was talking about, cloth has been around for, I don't know, 10,000 years, like a really long time. We know cloth well. The germ theory of disease has evolved, but maybe the recent theories since the 19th century, maybe recent theories. We have lots of diseases. People use masks in hospitals. I would bet we have a pretty clear understanding of what masks do and don't do with respect to viruses. I mean, we set up labs to study dangerous viruses, and we understand and don't understand. Like we know what they do and don't do. What magical thing has happened where our fundamental understanding of viruses and pieces of paper or cloth have suddenly, was there a breakthrough in biology that we are unaware of in the last year, where everything we knew about masks that Fauci knew in February is somehow different? Like, oh my God, this whole time masks have been working differently than we thought. Holy crap! Like, you could get your PhD thesis on, you could get your PhD on this. This is a breakthrough. It's a career-making breakthrough that these pieces of cloth that we have used since, at least since the germ theory's been around, that we've well understood, that we use everywhere, that we use in labs and in medical facilities, and different quality of the mask with different pore sizes for different environments with different risks. All that just turned on its head. We didn't understand.
We didn't know.
There's something new about masks that we didn't understand before. And oh my God, now we get it. Now we know. What the fuck is it that you figured out? What's the news, guys? What's the new scientific discovery? Please tell me what it is.
And they're not going to include it. That's missing context. I would like to know. That's the actual missing context? What did you learn?
Yeah. What did you learn?